My daughter abandoned me on the very night my heart nearly gave out. While I lay gasping for air, tethered to life by fragile wires and the mercy of doctors, she chose to stay at a restaurant, raising a glass to her husband's birthday. When the hospital staff called and pleaded with her to come quickly, her reply was cold and simple. "I'm busy." That sentence carved itself into me deeper than any scalpel ever could. 2 weeks later, I would make a phone call to the bank that changed everything, an act of quiet revenge wrapped in legal documents and sealed decisions. And by the time my daughter came storming into my house in a frenzy, it was already far too late. But before all of that, there was the night I almost didn't make it. The world dragged me back slowly, one sound at a time. At first there was only the steady rhythmic beep, 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 a mechanical pulse reminding me I was still clinging to life. My eyelids felt like slabs of stone, but when I forced them open, the harsh glare of fluorescent lights stabbed into my skull. A blurry figure leaned over me. Her voice calm but insistent. "Mr. Callahan, can you hear me?" I tried to speak, but my throat felt raw, coated in dust and fire. The room spun in dizzy fragments. White walls, tubes tangled around my arms, blinking machines that whispered how fragile I had become. My chest ached with every shallow breath. "What?" I croaked, my voice foreign even to me. "What happened?" The nurse leaned closer. Her badge read Janet. She had kind eyes tucked behind wire-rimmed glasses, and her tone was steady, like someone who had walked people back from the edge before. "You had a heart attack, Mr. Callahan. You're in St. Vincent's Intensive Care Unit. Today is Tuesday, April 15th. Tuesday? My brain struggled to catch up. The last thing I remembered was leaving for the hardware store Monday morning, whistling to myself as if I had all the time in the world. Everything after that was blank. "How long?" I rasped. "You've been here since yesterday evening," Janet replied gently. "Paramedics rushed you in around 7. You scared us for a while." Before I could answer, a doctor entered. He looked young but worn thin by long shifts, his stethoscope hanging like a permanent weight around his neck. He pressed the cold metal to my chest, his frown deepening as he listened. "Mr. Callahan, I'm Dr. Martinez. Your heart suffered serious damage, but for now you're stable. We'll need to monitor you closely over the next several days." Am I going to make it? The question slipped out weaker than I intended, the fear I had tried to bury breaking free. "With treatment and discipline, many patients recover well," he said, scribbling notes. "Medication, diet changes, follow-up appointments. You'll need to take this seriously." His words were clinical, but my mind, an engineer's mind, latched onto them like blueprints. Heart attack. Significant damage. Monitoring required. It didn't feel like my life anymore. It felt like a project that had failed inspection. Janet adjusted my IV and asked softly, "Are you still in pain?" I shifted and felt it instantly, like a heavy fist crushing my chest. "Some," I admitted. "That's normal," Dr. Martinez said. "We'll manage your pain, but you call us the moment it gets worse." The rest of the day blurred into a parade of needles, wires, and endless readings. Vitals checked, charts updated, strangers in scrubs flowing in and out, as if I were a revolving door of near death. By evening they decided I was stable enough to move. Janet oversaw the transfer herself, wheeling me down sterile corridors that all looked the same. White doors, humming machines, the faint smell of disinfectant in the air. "Room 412, she said at last, guiding me into a smaller space with a west-facing window. Through it, I watched the city surrender to night. The skyline twinkled like a circuit board, a reminder of blueprints I once studied in my younger years. Everything logical, everything precise, everything under control. But now my own body had become the one design that betrayed me. "Dr. Ellis will be in soon," Janet told me, checking my monitors one last time. "He's your cardiologist. You'll be in good hands." I sank into the bed, listening to the city's heartbeat through the glass, and I wondered if mine could be trusted to keep up. I sank back against the pillows, every muscle in my body trembling with exhaustion. It was strange after 68 years of standing tall, of priding myself on being the dependable one, the strong one. I suddenly found myself in a body I could no longer trust. My limbs felt foreign, hollowed out, and weak. Even the simple act of lifting a glass of water required help. For a man who had once built bridges and calculated the load of steel beams with ease, It was a kind of humiliation I wasn't ready to admit out loud. Outside my window, the sky over Chicago slowly bled from gray to black as evening settled over the city. Out there, life carried on without me, office lights flicking off as workers rushed home, children chasing one another in the last golden streaks of daylight, families gathering around tables heavy with dinner. The city was alive, and I lay here, tethered to machines that kept track of every fragile beat of my heart, reduced to numbers flashing on a monitor. A gentle knock pulled me from my thoughts. A man entered with the quiet authority of someone who didn't need to announce himself to be respected. "Callahan," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Dr. Grover Ellis, your cardiologist." He was tall and distinguished, silver threaded through his neatly combed hair, wire-rimmed glasses perched on his nose. There was a practiced calm about him, the kind that only comes from decades of delivering both hope and devastation in equal measure. He pulled a chair close, sat beside my bed, and glanced down at the thick chart resting in his lap. "How are you feeling this evening?" "Like a truck ran me over," I muttered, managing a dry laugh. "But better than this morning, I suppose." Dr. Ellis allowed himself a small smile before his face grew serious again. "I need to speak with you frankly about your condition." He unfolded an EKG printout and spread it across the tray table. Jagged black lines marched across the page like some cruel piece of abstract art. "The heart attack you suffered was severe, a STEMI. It affected the main artery supplying blood to your heart muscle. This section here," he tapped the paper with his pen, "shows the damage to your left anterior descending artery. We managed to restore some blood flow with emergency treatment, but you've lost about 20% of your heart muscle." The words hung in the sterile air. "And what does that mean for my future?" My voice was steadier than I felt. "With proper treatment, many patients go on to live full lives," he said, leaning forward. "But I won't lie to you, it was touch and go for several hours." I nodded slowly, my mind translating his medical terms into cold mechanical calculations. 20% damage, critical artery, a compromised system. It was one thing to repair a failing structure on paper, it was another to realize that failing structure was your own body. Then his tone shifted, more hesitant. "Mr. Callahan. Benjamin, may I ask, do you have any family we should contact?" My chest tightened at the question. "My daughter, Agnes. She lives in Lincoln Park with her husband." Dr. Ellis hesitated, glancing at his notes. His face softened into something almost apologetic. "I actually tried calling her yesterday, when you were admitted. At that point things were critical, we weren't sure you'd survive the night." A chill swept through me. "You spoke with her?" "I did," he said carefully, looking down at his hands before meeting my gaze again. "Benjamin, I've been a cardiologist for 25 years. I've made thousands of these calls. Usually, when I tell someone their father has suffered a massive heart attack and may not make it through the night, they drop everything. They run. They come." He paused. "But when I explained the severity to your daughter, she said she was busy. It was her husband's birthday. She told me she couldn't leave the party." The words hit me harder than any diagnosis. I felt my pulse spike, the heart monitor beside me beeping faster, louder, mocking me with each frantic beat. "Even when you told her," my throat caught, "that I might not survive." His voice was soft, almost regretful. "Yes. I told her you were asking for her. She said she'd try to come later in the week, if her schedule allowed." I stared at the ceiling, trying to steady my breathing. My daughter, the child I had raised, supported, sacrificed for, had dismissed the urgency of my dying, as if it were a mere inconvenience. A conflict in her calendar. "I'm sorry," Dr. Ellis said gently. "I debated whether to tell you, but I believe patients have a right to know." "No," I whispered. My voice sounded hollow, even to my own ears. "You were right. I needed to know." The doctor went on explaining medication schedules, recovery projections, the delicate balance of rest and movement. But I barely heard a word. My mind was trapped, replaying the moment over and over. She was busy. It was her husband's birthday. When he finally stood and excused himself, the room became impossibly still. Only the steady beep of my monitor reminded me I was still alive. Through the window, the city stretched endlessly, every twinkling light a reminder of families out there who would never hesitate to rush to one another's side. Families that weren't mine. I tried to tell myself maybe Agnes hadn't understood. Maybe she didn't realize how dire it was. But deep down I knew better. This wasn't the first time. It was simply the cruelest. My mind wandered back decades, to the day she opened her college acceptance letter. She was beaming, clutching the letter like it was a ticket to the stars. "Dad, I got into Northwestern," she had cried. The tuition was astronomical, $40,000 a year. My salary as an engineer was decent, but it wasn't that decent. Still, I couldn't say no. I worked 60-hour weeks, gave up vacations, put off retirement, drank more coffee than blood, until she graduated magna cum laude. Then came the wedding. Martin Harper, a smooth talker with an empty wallet. I'd seen his type before, but Agnes was convinced she'd found her fairy tale. "Dad, you only get married once," she pleaded. $15,000 later, she had her perfect day. My retirement account bled a little more, but she was happy. The years that followed blurred into a series of rescues. $12,000 for their first house, $8,000 for Martin's failed restaurant, $3,000 when Agnes lost her job, another $1,500 when their luxury car broke down. Every time they stumbled, I was there, checkbook in hand. By now the mental ledger in my head had tallied well over $100,000. But it wasn't the money that stung. It was the knowledge that all those sacrifices, all those years of bailing them out, had meant so little when I needed her most. And last night, while I lay gasping in this very hospital bed, Agnes had chosen champagne and candles over her father's life. The anger built slowly, starting as a faint warmth in my stomach and spreading until my chest burned with something that had nothing to do with cardiac damage. For 68 years, I had been the reliable one, the responsible one, the man who carried the weight, and what had it earned me? A daughter who saw me as a burden, and a son-in-law who lived like royalty on money he never earned. The monitor kept beeping steadily beside me, reminding me I was still alive, still capable of decisions, still in control of what I left behind. She thought she could dismiss me. She thought she could take me for granted, but she was about to learn how wrong she was. 3 days passed. My body was healing, but my resolve was hardening into something unshakable. Each morning, I swallowed my pills and let the bitterness dissolve on my tongue like medicine of a different kind. Rita, the physical therapist, cheerfully coaxed me into walks down the corridor. I shuffled past other patients, other fathers, other stories of betrayal. One man in room 352 caught my attention. He sat staring at a wilted flower arrangement, his eyes dull with grief. When I stopped at his door, he glanced up. "Morning, you're the engineer from 412, right?" "I'm Harold." "Benjamin," I said, leaning against the frame. "You seem troubled." His laugh was brittle. "My son cleaned out my savings while I was in here. 35,000, said he needed it for his business." He gestured toward the dying flowers. "That's all I got. A card that says he's sorry." The words stabbed at me. Another father, another betrayal. By the time I returned to my room, my decision had crystallized. That afternoon, I picked up the phone and dialed Chase Bank. "Chase Customer Service, this is Michelle. How may I help you today?" "This is Benjamin Callahan," I said, steadying my voice. "I need information on how to revoke power of attorney on my accounts." There was a pause, then the sound of fingers tapping a keyboard. "I'll need to verify your identity, sir. Once that's done, you'll need to appear in person with a photo ID, the original power of attorney document, and signed revocation forms. Once submitted, the process takes 24 hours to finalize." "Thank you," I said, and hung up. My hand lingered on the receiver, my mind racing. Agnes had held power of attorney for 2 years, ever since I'd been hospitalized with pneumonia. Back then, I had trusted her completely. But trust, I now realized, was just another account that could be emptied when you weren't looking. The paperwork was behind me. The hospital walls, with their sterile white paint and their endless beeping machines, had held me captive long enough. Now, as the wheelchair rolled me into the crisp April air, I felt a strange rebirth stir inside me. The sky stretched wide over Chicago, clear and unyielding, as though reminding me there was still time left, still work to be done. But not the kind of work I'd always done, late nights with blueprints, numbers, deadlines. No, this was different. This was the meticulous work of setting things right. I inhaled deeply, the air sharp against lungs that felt weaker than I remembered, and pulled out my phone. My fingers trembled, Whether from lingering fatigue or the fire of new determination, I wasn't sure. Chase Bank, customer service. This is Amanda, how can I help you today? I steadied my voice, though inside it thundered with quiet rage. This is Benjamin Dunn. I need to discuss revoking power of attorney over my accounts. The woman's tone shifted instantly, professional but cautious. Of course, Mr. Dunn. I'll need to verify your identity. As I rattled off my information, I felt every number, every address, every confirmation like a chain being unlocked. When she explained the procedure, proper documentation, in-person verification, revocation forms, I listened as though she were laying out blueprints for my future. When I hung up, my reflection in the hospital's glass entrance doors caught my eye. I looked older, thinner, haunted, but behind the exhaustion, there was something sharper. I didn't just look like a man who had survived. I looked like a man who had finally seen the truth. The following week unfolded with mechanical precision. Every day, I pushed myself further. Longer walks, fewer pills, fuller meals. My body was mending, but more importantly, so was my will. On Wednesday, I called Thompson & Associates, the notary office downtown. I'd like to discuss modifying my will, I said. The receptionist's tone was polite but businesslike. Of course, sir, Illinois law requires you to appear in person with 2 witnesses. If there have been recent medical issues, we also recommend documentation of mental competency. What kind of documentation? I asked. A signed letter from your attending physician should suffice. I almost smiled. Perfect. Dr. Ellis would vouch for my clarity without hesitation. He had already seen the steel forming beneath the frailty. By Friday, the discharge papers were in my hands. Agnes had called once during that week, a perfunctory, distracted check-in that carried all the warmth of a cold voicemail. I'm glad you're doing better, Dad, she'd said, her voice drifting somewhere between boredom and preoccupation. That's great, Dad. Martin and I have been swamped with his new consulting venture. We'll try to visit once you're home and settled. Try. As if seeing whether her father lived or died had to be penciled between cocktail parties and Martin's pipe dream businesses. Her words sat inside me like acid, eating away whatever softness had remained. That evening, I sat with Eleanor from room 341 in the hospital's small garden. She cradled a styrofoam cup of tea, her hands trembling with the effort. 30 years, she said bitterly. 30 years of raising that girl, putting her through school, watching her children every weekend. Then I needed gallbladder surgery. You know what she told me? Too important, couldn't take time off work. I listened as she poured her heart out, each word a mirror of my own wounds. When she finally said, "Every penny goes to the animal shelter now. At least dogs are loyal," her voice carried a resolve I recognized instantly. Her words followed me back to my room. They didn't just echo, they rooted themselves, deep and permanent. The next morning, Dr. Ellis came by with the final round of instructions. "Benjamin, I hope you'll consider forgiveness," he said, his tired eyes carrying genuine concern. "Holding on to anger isn't good for your heart." I gave him a faint smile. "Doctor, I'm not holding on to anger. I'm holding on to clarity." And for the first time in weeks, I realized I meant it. Tomorrow, I would go home. Tomorrow, the true work would begin. The accounts, the will, the legacy, every piece of my life, Agnes thought she controlled would slip through her fingers like sand. She believed her father was nothing more than an ATM with a weak heart. She thought she could leave me to die while she toasted another year of her husband's hollow existence. She was wrong. What she had mistaken for a dying man's weakness was in fact the sharpening edge of justice, and justice, unlike love, does not forgive. Benjamin Dunn. Account number 4478921. I need to revoke power of attorney on all my accounts. Immediately. The customer service rep's voice was polite but mechanical, as though she were reading from a script. "I can assist with that, Mr. Dunn, but revocation requires your physical presence at a branch office. You'll need photo identification, the original power of attorney documents, and you'll sign the revocation forms in front of a bank officer." I didn't hesitate. "Which branch?" "Our main downtown office at 125 South Lasso can process it. They're open until 4 p.m. Perfect. Time enough to return home, gather what I needed, and start unraveling the web my daughter thought she had spun so tightly around me. I closed the call and opened the rideshare app. The interface still felt foreign compared to the simple act of dialing a cab number, but my fingers moved with surprising steadiness. Home address, Evanston. Pickup immediate. Driver, Victor. Estimated arrival, 8 minutes. 8 minutes to stand on this sidewalk, tasting freedom in the April air, feeling the weight of my decision settle over me like a well-fitted coat. All around me, life pulsed forward. A businessman rushed by shouting into his phone about quarterly earnings and his daughter's missed recital. A young mother pushed a stroller while juggling a daycare call, her face etched with exhaustion but determination. People with responsibilities. People who mattered to someone. Everyone except me. But that was about to change. For 68 years I had been the dependable one, the safety net stretched under everyone else's ambitions. I worked overtime to fund Agnes's education, emptied my savings to finance her wedding, bled my retirement dry to prop up her husband's string of failures. And when I lay in a hospital bed fighting for my life, she couldn't even leave a birthday party. My phone buzzed. "Your driver, Victor, is arriving in a white Honda Accord." The car pulled up smoothly to the curb. A middle-aged man with graying temples stepped out, moving with the careful grace of someone who had spent his life helping others into his vehicle. "Northwestern Memorial. You okay, my friend?" he asked, reaching instinctively for my hospital bag. "I'm better now," I said, sliding into the seat. The car smelled faintly of coffee and pine, a rosary swinging gently from the rearview mirror, and a small faded photo taped to the dashboard. "Evanston, up Sheridan Road," Victor confirmed, checking his GPS before pulling into traffic. "Heart trouble," I offered, surprised by my own bluntness. Most people avoided saying it outright. Victor nodded knowingly. "My father had 3 heart attacks. Worked construction 40 years. Tough man." First time we all rallied. By the third, he let out a humorless laugh. My siblings said the hospital visits were interfering with their schedules. He glanced at me in the mirror. "Family's complicated, isn't it?" I stared out the window at Lake Michigan, its waters restless under the April wind. My daughter couldn't even leave her husband's birthday party when the doctor said I might not survive the night. Victor's hands tightened on the wheel. "Man, that hurts. How old is she?" 42. "Old enough to understand priorities." "You'd think so," he murmured. Silence stretched between us, until I nodded toward the photo on his dashboard. "Your son?" His face softened. "Eduardo. Marketing executive in Los Angeles. Beautiful house, expensive car. I was proud once." His voice hardened. "Haven't heard from him in 5 years. Last time we spoke, he told me to stop calling. Said it was embarrassing when his colleagues knew his father was just a cab driver." The words struck like a blow to the chest. Here was a man who carried the same scar I did, abandoned, discarded by the very child he had sacrificed everything for. "How do you live with that kind of betrayal?" I asked quietly. Victor's eyes flicked toward me in the rearview before returning to the road. "I learned something, Benjamin. Family isn't just blood. Family is the ones who show up, who answer the phone at midnight, who sit in hospital waiting rooms when everyone else is too busy." We passed through Lincoln Park, not far from the condo where Agnes and Martin lived, filled with the furniture I had paid for and the comfort they believed was theirs by right. The irony made my chest ache. "After Eduardo cut me off, I wasted 2 years angry," Victor continued. "Then I realized I was still giving him power, letting him dictate my happiness even in his absence. So what did you do?" He smiled faintly, and for the first time it reached his eyes. "Started living for myself. Took trips, learned guitar, found friends who liked me for me. Turns out I'm good company when I'm not wasting my time on ungrateful children." We entered Evanston, passing the campus where I had once proudly dropped Agnes off for her overpriced education. Students hurried across the sidewalks with backpacks and limitless futures, most of them carrying dreams fueled by parents who believed sacrifice equaled love. Victor slowed as we turned down my street. My house came into view, a modest 2-story colonial, its paint chipped, its yard slightly overgrown since my health had faltered. Once it had looked like a fortress of safety, now it seemed small, diminished, almost embarrassed by what I had become. Victor put the car in park and turned fully to me. "Benjamin, I don't know all your details, But if your daughter thinks she can ignore you while you're dying, maybe it's time she learns what life looks like without your support." He helped me out of the car, waving away the tip I tried to press into his hand. Instead, he slipped me a card. "My number's in your phone now. You need groceries, rides, someone to talk to. You call me." That's what real family does. I stood in my driveway as he pulled away, the rosary swaying in his rearview mirror until his car disappeared. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't alone, and as I looked up at the house I had built and sacrificed to maintain, I realized something Agnes never had. Family isn't who takes from you, it's who shows up. And soon she would learn the cost of mistaking me for a man too weak to fight back. Victor's words echoed in my mind as I stepped into my house for the first time in 2 weeks. Family is who shows up when you need them. Agnes hadn't shown up. Victor had. Dr. Ellis had. Even Harold and Eleanor, 2 strangers in hospital gowns, had shown more compassion than my own daughter. It was time to start living for myself. Time for Agnes to learn what consequences looked like. The key clicked in the lock, a sound so ordinary and yet so comforting after sterile hospital halls. Home. The air smelled faintly stale from 2 weeks sealed shut, but it was still mine, my sanctuary, my fortress of control. I had barely set my hospital bag down when the doorbell shrieked, followed instantly by violent pounding. The blows shook the frosted glass in its frame. "Dad, open up, we know you're in there." Agnes's voice. The sharp edge I remembered from her teenage tantrums, only now polished into something colder, harder, desperate. I opened the door. There they stood, Agnes and Martin, like an invading army. My daughter's hair was disheveled, her designer suit wrinkled, her eyes fever-bright with anger. Martin loomed just behind her, wearing that swaggering smirk I'd come to despise. Agnes shoved past me without waiting for an invitation, Martin following in her wake. "What did you do with the power of attorney?" she snapped, spinning on me. "The bank called us an hour ago. Do you have any idea how stupid this is?" I closed the door slowly, giving myself the upper hand in the silence that followed. "I was lying in a hospital bed dying, and you were at a birthday party." The words hung heavy between us. Martin stepped forward, using his size like a weapon. "Old man, you don't understand what you're doing. You need financial supervision. That heart attack clearly rattled your judgment." "My judgment," I said evenly, moving toward the living room, forcing them to follow. "My judgment told me to revoke control of my accounts from people who couldn't bother to see if I lived through the night." Agnes flushed crimson. "We didn't know it was that serious. The doctor made it sound routine." I locked eyes with her. "Dr. Ellis told you I might not survive. You said you were busy." Her face faltered, words stumbling. "That's not how did you?" Martin's hand clamped on her arm before she could slip further. He recovered for her, his tone oily, calculated. "Benjamin, you're confused. Heart attacks cause memory gaps. You don't remember correctly. We were there for you." I lowered myself into my armchair, the one I'd bought after a month of overtime shifts to pay for Agnes's wedding. "You're lying to my face. In my home." Agnes's voice slid into the old manipulative tone I remembered from her childhood. "Dad, please. Don't let hospital staff fill your head with nonsense. They probably just want to turn you against us. Get out." The words were quiet, but absolute. Martin's face darkened. "You can't just kick us out. We're family. We have rights." "This is my house," I said, rising with a steadiness that surprised me. "And you're trespassing." Agnes tried to step between us, her polished business mask cracking. "Dad, please, think rationally. You're making a mistake that affects all of us." I stared at her with new clarity. "The only mistake I made was trusting you with my life savings." Martin's fists balled. "Ungrateful old fool. We've sacrificed for you. Agnes has managed everything for years. And this is how you repay us." The word sacrificed tasted like poison. "I paid for your restaurant when it failed. I covered your credit card debts. I gave you the down payment for your condo. What exactly have you sacrificed?" Agnes shot Martin a warning glance, but it was too late. The truth had already slipped free. I opened the front door, holding it wide. "Get out of my house." Agnes's mask shattered completely, her voice sharp with venom. "This isn't over, Dad. We'll fight this. We'll prove you're not competent. Martin leaned in as he passed, his breath hot with threat. You have no idea what you've started, old man. The door slammed behind them, shaking the glass panes. Outside, car doors slammed, and their engine roared to life, tires spitting gravel as they tore down the street. I stood in the silence they left behind. Silence that wasn't peaceful, it was charged, alive, like the air before a storm breaks. With shaking hands, I slid the deadbolt home. Click. The house felt violated. My sanctuary, trampled. Even the throw pillow Agnes had knocked askew seemed like evidence of their intrusion. Her parting words replayed in my mind. We'll prove you're not competent. I walked slowly to the kitchen, knees still unsteady, and filled the kettle. The familiar ritual calmed me. Tea had always been my thinking drink. The water began to boil, my hand steadied. Martin's aggression hadn't been about concern. It had been desperation. Panic. He saw the walls closing in. And as I poured steaming water over the Earl Grey leaves, watching the amber swirl into life, I realized something. They weren't here to protect me. They were here to protect themselves. And that meant I was finally holding the one thing they couldn't control anymore: leverage. I watched through the living room window as Agnes's BMW disappeared down the street. Yet even with the car gone, their presence lingered, like smoke clinging to a room long after the fire has been put out. We have rights. We'll fight this. Martin's words replayed in my head. He hadn't just been angry, he'd been afraid. That panic meant something deeper. If losing access to my money made them desperate enough to storm my house, then they had been depending on me far more than I ever realized. I sank into my reading chair, angled just right to catch the afternoon light. Across the street, Mrs. Rodriguez tended her roses, and the mailman made his steady rounds. Suburban life ticked forward, oblivious. But inside my home, my world had tilted into a new orbit. Canceling the power of attorney had only been the opening move. They'd made it clear. We'll prove you're not competent. Those words weren't idle threats. They carried legal weight, dangerous implications. If Agnes and Martin convinced a court I wasn't mentally fit, they could seize control again through guardianship. I'd be stripped of autonomy, reduced to a ward in my own home. No, not without a fight. I reached for the notebook on my side table, the one that had held decades of engineering calculations, circuit designs, and problem solving. Now it would hold something else: my defense. I wrote Agnes and Martin: financial desperation, willing to weaponize legal system. Requires stronger protection. The sunlight warmed the familiar room, but it felt different now. This quiet life, reading, planning, controlling the small comforts, was over. They'd made sure of that. Victor's voice echoed in memory. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for ungrateful children is let them face the consequences of their choices. Canceling the power of attorney had been consequence number one. But if Agnes and Martin wanted to escalate this battle, then I would show them exactly how costly their greed could become. I picked up the phone. Time to call Thompson and Associates. My will needed updating. 2 days later, Mrs. Rodriguez approached as I checked my mail. Her warm smile was gone, replaced by hesitant concern. Benjamin, she began carefully, how are you feeling after your incident? That word incident set off alarms in my engineer's mind. Maria had known me 15 years, never once speaking to me with such fragile caution. I'm recovering well, I said evenly. Why do you ask? She shifted her gloves from one hand to the other, uneasy. Your daughter stopped by yesterday. She seemed very concerned about you living alone after the heart attack. My pulse spiked though. I kept my face neutral. Agnes was here. Maria nodded, lowering her voice. She told me you've become forgetful, confused, that you might need supervision. The air around me seemed to tighten. Doubt. That was what Agnes was planting. Poison dripping into the ears of my neighbors. What exactly did she say? I pressed. Maria fidgeted, reluctant. That you've been making irrational financial decisions, canceling important arrangements without understanding what you were doing. She asked me to keep an eye on you. To call her if you seemed unstable. The strategy crystallized instantly. This wasn't just a legal fight. They were staging a character assassination. Building a case not just in court, but in the very community I lived in. I drew in a breath, steadying myself. Maria, when we talked about your roses last week, about the aphids, did I sound confused to you? Her face softened, relief washing over her. No, not at all, you gave excellent advice. It worked actually. Then trust that judgment, I said quietly, not gossip. She nodded, visibly comforted, but inside I was anything but. 3 days later, I sat across from Janet Chen, the branch manager at Chase Bank, after finalizing new security measures for my accounts. She leaned in, lowering her voice. Mr. Dunn, I probably shouldn't tell you this, she began carefully, but your daughter was here yesterday, asking about procedures for financial guardianship. Ice pooled in my stomach. Guardianship. What did she want to know? I asked. She wanted specifics. What medical documentation would be required to have someone declared incapable of handling their own affairs? There it was. The proof. This wasn't concern. It wasn't family love. It was a coup, and they were moving fast. Janet glanced over her shoulder, then lowered her voice. She seemed very focused on post-heart attack cognitive impairment, what it takes to claim diminished capacity. My mouth went dry. Did she file anything? No, Janet said, but she booked a consultation with our legal department for next week. I thanked her and walked out into the wind off the lake with a new clarity burning through my chest. Agnes wasn't posturing, she was strategizing. By the following Tuesday, the scale of their campaign came into full view. At Brewster's Coffee, my haunt for a decade, Tom Brewster's smile faltered as I stepped in. Benjamin, good to see you're managing okay. Even Tom, who'd known me since Agnes was in college, looked like he was bracing for an episode. Tom, I asked lightly, did someone suggest I'm not managing well? His eyes flickered. Your daughter and her husband stopped by. Mentioned you've had difficulties since the hospital. Impulsive decisions, confusion with money. I ordered my usual black coffee, counted exact change into his palm, and spent 5 calm minutes discussing the Cubs infield and the bullpen's ERA like a man reading a blueprint. Tom's shoulders eased. You seem fine to me, he admitted as I turned to go. That's because I am fine, I said. Remember that when anyone suggests otherwise. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and the same pen that had inked decades of calculations. I assembled the facts like a load analysis. 3 neighbors approached, 1 bank, 1 local business. A coordinated narrative of decline. Witnesses seated, themes rehearsed. I wrote Agnes plus Martin organized competency challenge. Timeline approximately 1 week. Targets, neighbors, bank, merchants. Goal, establish pattern of cognitive decline, guardianship. Countermeasure, immediate, multi-front response. They had turned my community into a courtroom and drafted my acquaintances as their witnesses. Coldly efficient, almost admirable, if it hadn't been aimed at erasing me. I dialed Thompson and Associates. This is Benjamin Callahan. I need to accelerate my will modification. How soon? Tomorrow, 10 a.m. I'll be there. They had declared war on my independence, my reputation, my right to live as a competent man. They thought a recovering heart would be an easy target. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The glass elevator climbed to the 14th floor of the LaSalle Street building, Chicago widening beneath me like a circuit board, families that supported one another, and families that devoured their own. I finally knew which kind mine was. James Mitchell's corner office looked east toward Lake Michigan, morning light clean and unblinking over the water. His receptionist led me to a conference room where documents were already arrayed on mahogany like pieces on a chessboard. Mr. Callahan, please have a seat. Mitchell was maybe 50, gray at the temples, the careful demeanor of a man who had seen 1,000 family battles and outlasted every one of them. Before we proceed, I need to ask a few standard questions to verify mental competency. Of course, what's today's date? May 12, 2025. Tuesday. Current president? Donald Trump, I said, and let the distaste hang. His mouth twitched. The answer was what mattered. Why are you here, Mr. Callahan? To revoke my existing will and draft a new one disinheriting my daughter and her husband entirely. He studied me for a quiet beat. That's significant. Are you certain? I slid my notebook across the table, the ledger of their campaign since my heart attack. 3 weeks documentation. They've seeded my neighborhood with claims of confusion, pressed the bank for guardianship procedures, threatened me in my own home. My daughter refused to come when the ICU believed I might not survive the night. When I took back control of my accounts, they escalated. Mitchell paged through the entries, nodding at the timestamps, the names, the direct quotes, the places. Thorough, he said. This will help. Illinois allows complete disinheritance. The key is building a file that withstands capacity challenges. What challenges do you anticipate? I asked. They'll argue your heart attack impaired cognition. They'll try to lean on neighbors and local business owners to attest to confusions or impulsive decisions. They may seek guardianship, using any hint of diminished capacity to claw back control. I know, I said. They've already started, then we get ahead of it. Mitchell said, shifting into the precise cadence of a field surgeon. First, I want a signed capacity letter from your attending cardiologist, Dr. Grover Ellis, correct? Ideally, we'll add a brief neurocognitive screen, name recall, serial 7s, clock draw. Second, we will execute the will with 2 independent witnesses, a notary, and a video record of the signing in which you clearly state your intentions and reasons. Third, we include a robust in terrorem clause. If Agnes or her husband contest, they forfeit any token bequest and pay the estate's legal costs. He slid a draft outline toward me. Fourth, he continued, we move key assets into a revocable living trust and name a corporate fiduciary as successor trustee, not family. We'll pair this with beneficiary updates on financial accounts, transfer on death, payable on death, so the plan operates outside probate, where possible. I felt the blueprint taking shape, beams slotting into columns, load paths closing. Fifth, Mitchell said, we replace your prior powers of attorney. New financial POA naming the trust company and myself in succession, not your daughter. New healthcare proxy, naming someone you trust to follow your wishes. Done, I said, and we document why. Exactly. We'll attach a contemporaneous letter, your words dated today, explaining, calmly and specifically, why Agnes is excluded. No invective, just facts. He glanced back at my notebook. You already speak like a record the court will respect. He paused. Mr. Callahan, one more suggestion. You've described a community smear. I recommend 2 simple counters. Begin a dated daily journal of routine tasks and interactions, appointments kept, bills paid, conversations noted, and schedule a courtesy visit with your primary physician to memorialize your recovery milestones. It's mundane, but judges like paper, and paper doesn't forget. I nodded. What about the house? Deed it into the trust this week, he said. And install a simple video doorbell, if you haven't already. You mentioned threats. We don't invite conflict, but we do document it if they bring it to your doorstep. He rested his pen. Now who receives your estate? For a moment the lake's brightness filled the room. I saw Victor's quiet kindness at the curb. Eleanor's grief in the garden. Harold's hollow laugh over a wilted bouquet. People who showed up. Not Agnes, I said. Not Martin. The trust's primary beneficiary will be the North Shore Animal Shelter. I thought of Eleanor's steel-edged voice, at least dogs are loyal. A portion to the Dr. Grover Ellis Cardiac Recovery Fund. Specific gifts to neighbors who helped me. Maria Rodriguez, in thanks for 15 years of decency. And a bequest to Victor Ramirez, who reminded me that family is the ones who show up. Mitchell wrote steadily, expression unreadable but warm at the edges. We'll draft letters of instruction to accompany each gift. Clear, gracious, unassailable. He slid the final page toward me. We can execute the preliminary documents today pending Dr. Ellis's capacity letter and the neurocognitive screen this afternoon. Once those are in the file, we'll finalize the trust transfer and beneficiary updates. I looked down at the pen, my hand steady. Let's begin, I said. The camera light blinked red as I stated my name, the date, the city, and the purpose. I articulated the reasons, measured and exact, the way an engineer explains a failed load test. Agnes and Martin had treated my life like a revenue stream. When I refused, they tried to erase me. I would not be erased. The witnesses initialed. The notary's stamp thudded against the paper like a heartbeat. When it was done, Mitchell capped his pen. Mr. Callahan, one final note. We'll file a notice revoking all prior powers with your bank and provide them a passworded verification protocol. If anyone comes fishing, legal or otherwise, they'll hit a wall. I stood, feeling the unfamiliar warmth of air that belonged to me again. Outside, the lake threw sunlight at the glass towers without apology. They had built a case against my mind. I had built a fortress around my life, and the next time Agnes tried to turn my name into a legal strategy, she'd discover that the cost of ignoring me was far higher than she ever imagined. Mitchell leaned forward, his pen tapping rhythmically against the polished mahogany desk, eyes narrowing as though he could see straight into the schemes of Agnes and Martin. "They'll try to claim you're not of sound mind, Mr. Dunn. That's the oldest trick in the book. We'll make sure that door is bolted shut before they even think of pushing on it." I watched him carefully, as he began to draft language sharper than any blade, sentences that would cut down every desperate argument my daughter and her husband might fling at the court. His words weren't just ink on paper, they were armor. The new will took shape slowly, deliberately, each clause written with a precision that felt like a blueprint for justice. When it was complete, my entire estate, my home, my savings, my lifetime of investments, was pledged to the American Heart Association. Agnes and Martin would get nothing more than $1 each, a cruel token to remind them that they had not been forgotten, merely dismissed. "This clause here," Mitchell explained, sliding the document toward me, his finger tapping a particular paragraph, "states explicitly that you are of sound mind and body, and that your choice was made freely, after careful consideration. Any attempt to challenge your competency will mean forfeiting even that $1. A slow smile crept across my face. Ironclad indeed. The paralegals entered a moment later, two strangers with neutral eyes, perfect witnesses. They didn't know me, hadn't heard the accusations Agnes had whispered behind my back, hadn't been poisoned by Martin's smug confidence. To them, I was just another man making an ordinary decision. But to me, their presence meant freedom. "Mr. Dunn," Mitchell asked, in a tone that carried all the gravity of a courtroom oath, "do you understand the contents of this will?" I straightened, steady, unshaken. "I do. I understand completely. I'm leaving everything to charity. My daughter and her husband will receive exactly $1. My voice did not waver. "And are you making this decision of your own free will, without coercion or pressure of any kind?" Mitchell continued. "Absolutely," I replied. "This is the most rational choice I've made in years." The pen felt weighty in my hand, but my grip was firm, as steady as it had been when I drafted engineering blueprints decades ago. With one clean stroke after another, I signed my name. The witnesses followed, their signatures binding the moment in black ink. Finally, Mitchell pressed his notary seal into the paper, its embossed crest gleaming like the final nail in a coffin. "This will is now legally binding," he declared. "I'll secure the original in my office, safe, and file a copy with Cook County Probate Court tomorrow. Your estate is untouchable." As I left the office and stepped into the descending elevator, an unexpected lightness filled me, as though the weight of my family's betrayal had been cut loose. Agnes and Martin had questioned my competency, tried to reduce me to a frail, confused old man. But now, the trap was set. Their war against me had only one possible outcome, and it wasn't the victory they imagined. 3 days later, the late afternoon sun painted long shadows across my living room carpet, the very same spot where Agnes and Martin had stood 2 weeks earlier, dripping venom into my ears, threatening, manipulating, circling like vultures. But the power they once held over me had evaporated. The will rested safe in Mitchell's office, but its true strength was in my mind. I knew what awaited them. At exactly 4 o'clock, I picked up the phone. The timing was deliberate. 4 o'clock meant they would both be home, trapped together, forced to hear every word. The line clicked, and then came Agnes' familiar voice, a mix of surprise and carefully staged sweetness. "Dad, oh, you sound good. How are you feeling?" I smiled, though she couldn't see it. "Much better," I replied evenly. "In fact, I'm calling to inform you of something rather important." I kept my tone light, almost casual, like we were discussing the weather. "I've changed my will." The silence that followed stretched long enough for me to savor every second of it. The silence on the line stretched so long I could count my own heartbeats. Then Agnes' voice came back, sharper, higher, trembling with disbelief. "Changed it, how completely?" I let the words drip slowly, savoring the impact. "When I die, you'll receive nothing." The air seemed to crackle on the other end. "What? What are you talking about?" "Nothing? That's impossible." "Not impossible," I said, my voice calm, cold, deliberate. Everything goes to the American Heart Association. You and Martin will each receive exactly $1, just so there's no mistake. I didn't forget you. I rejected you." There was a loud clatter, as though she'd dropped the phone, then a hiss of frantic whispering, muffled but urgent. Seconds later, Martin's voice barged onto the line, full of bluster. "Benjamin, you can't be serious about this nonsense." I almost laughed. "Dead serious, Martin. The new will was signed 3 days ago, witnessed, notarized, and already filed with probate court. It's ironclad." Agnes' voice returned, but now it was shaking. "Dad, this is insane. You can't just know, we need to talk about this face to face." "Feel free to come over," I said. "I'll be waiting," and I hung up. I brewed a cup of tea and settled into my reading chair, the late afternoon sun flooding the room in golden light. It was peaceful, serene, while across the city, my daughter and her husband were unraveling, panic chewing through their carefully built illusions. 47 minutes later, the doorbell rang, sharp, urgent, almost frantic. Right on schedule. When I opened the door, Agnes pushed past me immediately. Martin close behind. But they were different now. The arrogance, the casual cruelty they carried last time, they were gone. What I saw instead was desperation, frantic and unpolished. "Dad, please tell me this is some kind of joke." Agnes' hair was disheveled, her crisp business suit wrinkled as though she'd been pacing, clawing at herself with worry. "No joke," I said evenly. "Legal documents don't have punchlines." Martin tried to puff himself up, stepping close, looming over me with false bravado. "Old man, you don't know what you're doing. This decision affects more than just you." "Really?" I tilted my head. "And who else does it affect, Martin? Your future, your plans, your comfort?" He froze, jaw tightening, words choking off before he could admit the truth. Their entire existence had been built on the assumption that I was their personal bank account. Agnes collapsed onto the couch without invitation, her hands trembling. "Daddy, I made mistakes. I know I did, but cutting me out completely? That's not who you are." "You're right," I said, my voice calm, but cutting. "The man who tolerated your neglect and abuse died in Northwestern Memorial Hospital. I'm someone else now." Her voice cracked into pleading, almost childlike. "I'll be better. I'll call every day. I'll visit. I promise." I leaned forward, eyes locked on hers. "Agnes, where were you on April 14th when I was dying?" She froze, lips parting, but no sound coming. "I'll tell you," I continued, my tone sharp as glass. "You were at Martin's birthday party. Dr. Ellis told me how you said you might try to visit, if your schedule allowed. That's who you are." Martin's face darkened instantly. "That doctor violated confidentiality." "No," I snapped back. "He told the truth. Something you two wouldn't recognize if it was staring you in the mirror." Agnes began to cry, real tears now, streaking mascara down her face like the last paint washing off a mask. "I was wrong. I made a terrible mistake. But you can't punish me for the rest of my life." I stood, towering above them, calm as stone. "I'm not punishing you for the rest of your life, Agnes, I'm punishing you for the rest of mine." The words cut her deeper than any blade. She crumpled, and Martin dropped beside her, his hand gripping her arm, both of them now beneath my eyeline, begging. "Please, Benjamin, we're begging you. Don't do this." Now they knew, now they felt what it was like to be powerless, to plead for mercy and receive none. "Now you know how it feels," I said quietly. "To be abandoned, in your darkest hour." Agnes' tears mixed with rage. "Please, Daddy, I'm sorry. I am so sorry." "Sorry you got caught?" I asked coldly. "Or sorry you did it?" Martin's grip on her arm tightened, dragging her upward, his face hardened, all pretense gone. "Fine, if that's how you want to play it, old man, we'll see about that." "What game, Martin?" "The competency hearing," he snarled. "We'll prove you're unfit. That heart attack scrambled your brain. No rational man destroys his own family over a misunderstanding." Agnes wiped her face, snapping back into her business tone, though her voice trembled. "Dad, we've already spoken to your neighbors, your bank. People are concerned about your condition." I rose to my full height, glaring down at them. "You mean the lies you've been spreading, the campaign you've been running?" "It's not lies when it's true," Martin snapped. You're old, sick, irrational. The only irrational decision I made, I growled, was trusting either of you with my life. Agnes stepped forward, trying to block me. We're not leaving until you reconsider. You're not staying regardless. I brushed past her, and opened the door wide. This is still my house. Martin blocked me, fists clenched. You'll regret this, Benjamin. We'll fight with everything we have. With what money? I shot back, my voice like steel. Oh, that's right, you don't have any. The truth slammed into them like a brick wall. For the first time, they understood. Without me, without my estate, they had nothing. Agnes' face drained of color. You can't just abandon us like this. Watch me. Martin's fists trembled at his sides. You think you're so smart, but you're just a bitter old man who'll die alone. Better alone, I said, my voice low, final, than surrounded by leeches who see me as nothing but an ATM. Agnes' tears dried into rage, her voice now a hiss. This isn't over. We'll find a way. We'll contest. We'll prove you incompetent. You'll do exactly what you did when I was dying. I cut her off. Nothing. The door swung open wider. Because when it matters, you only think of yourselves. Martin leaned in close, his whisper dripping with venom. You have no idea what you've started. This war isn't over. Agnes lingered in the doorway, her eyes a twisted storm of grief and calculation. I'm still your daughter, no matter what paper says. Daughters have rights. Daughters who show up have rights, I said coldly. Daughters who abandon their fathers have consequences. They left, but not quietly. Agnes slammed the door so hard the windows rattled. Outside, their voices carried across the neighborhood, anger, blame, strategy, already fighting with each other. I locked the door and sat back in my chair, the peace of my home settling around me once more. The battle wasn't finished. I knew they'd try again, challenge the will, drag me into court, smear my name. But I had spent 4 decades designing structures to withstand storms. This was no different. Chicago night settled over my quiet street, but in my house, I felt steady. Ready, waiting. The war had only begun,